I cannot tell you how excited I am to be reading here at the Mount. I mean, I just can't believe here I am. This is it. I've been looking forward to this particular reading more than all the other readings across the country that I'm going to be doing, because this is Edith's house. And it's, you know, it's funny because I have loved Edith and her writing all my life. I mean, really since I was a young girl. And, you know, I tried to think about, why is that? Why was I so drawn to her? One of the reasons is because her characters are often in the situation where they are being buffeted by expectations for them that do not match who they are. And they fight this, and in many cases they lose. In some of her best books, they cannot fight what's expected of them. And you know, I think as a girl old enough to have grown up in an era where there were certain expectations for women that were limited, I really related to her characters and felt that, you know, this is somebody who understands what it's like to be told you aren't supposed to have the life that you want to lead. Now, Edith herself overcame it. If you think about it, she was so unique for her era. She, you know, published 50 books. She did not let anyone stop her. But the one thing she did not succeed at, and she was until she was 45 years old, was to ever have love in her life. She did not know what that meant, and really, that's what this book is about. It's not a happy book because it wasn't a happy love, but it was a woman of 45 years old who feels almost like a young girl when somebody who she's very attracted to pays attention to her. Let me tell you a little bit about how I came to write this book. The coincidences are rather startling. I mean, it's serendipity beyond anyone's imagination. I was in Paris on business, and I had 2 weeks before that had lunch with my agent, who's been my agent for 20 years, and I said, you know, I don't know what my next book's going to be. I just don't know. I'm stuck. Give me an assignment. I'm really good with assignments. and so I was in Paris, and I came a day early so I could get over jet lag, and I took a walk through Edith's neighborhood for the first time and walked down the rue de Varenne. And I came back to my hotel room that afternoon, and there was a message from Lisa, my agent, call me. So, because I was on my company's dime, I picked up my phone and I called her, and she said, oh, I have an idea for you. Why don't you write about your favorite author, Edith Wharton? And she knew that I loved Edith Wharton because my first book is called Lily Beach. And it was as an homage to Lily Bart that I named her that, and she knew that immediately. That's why I knew she had to be my agent. And so you know, when she said that, I have to tell you, my heart skipped a beat. I mean, I now know what that means. I started to palpitate. I was so excited I could not sleep that night. I was up all night on the internet looking up, what's the story? I didn't really know. I knew she'd had a love affair. That's all I knew. I didn't know what I was going to write about. And from that moment on, this has been, without question, the greatest assignment I've ever been given. Edith called it a donné, when somebody gives you the gift of an idea, and this was the donné of my lifetime. And then another thing happened. I decided after a few months of writing I really needed another outside character to view Edith, so that it wasn't just from her point of view, but that we could see Edith from the outside. And, you know, I realized that this woman, Anna Ballman, had been with Edith for so many years. She was her governess, and then she was her secretary. She was like a companion. She lived with her at points. And I thought, you know, they must have been very close, but nobody had written much about her at all. And immediately I did some research online and found out, even though a number of the biographers had said she was from Germany, she wasn't from Germany. She was born in New York. It was easy to 5 minutes I found that out, because I found her birth information. Her death certificate actually was what told me. And so I started to do research about her, and you know, I was online all the time. Let me see what I can find out about her. And one night I couldn't sleep, and anyone my age knows what that means. And so I got up and I went online, and I looked up Anna Ballman. And there it said that Christie's that week was going to auction off over 100 letters from Edith to Anna Ballman that had been in an attic for 100 years. And again, you know, it was just the serendipity. I just couldn't believe it. I called Christie's the next day. They let me go over there and sit at a table for hours and hours reading through the letters. And I went the day after, and I told my boss I had a bad toothache and had to work on my dental work. And so I knew that this was going to be, you know, it was even better than everything I'd imagined about their closeness was true and more. So I was able to go back and add even things that I hadn't known. This book takes place from the years 1907 to 1910 with an epilogue in 1916. And it takes place at the Mount and in Paris and in London. And and I have decided, by the way, that I'm going to only read things that happen at the Mount. In fact, something that happened right here on this terrace, and I will read that to you. Edith is 45 years old, and like I said, a very successful writer now, because the House of Mirth has come out, and it is very, very popular. It's really the first book that makes her famous, and she almost doesn't know what to do with that fame. And she is at a salon in Paris. She and Teddy, for the first time, have decided to spend the winter in Paris, and she's been to Paris many times, but this was, she really thought she wanted to spend more time abroad. And she sees a man across the room, and it's William Morton Fullerton, who was a younger reporter for the London Times, which was really quite an honor in those days for someone to be an American who wrote for the London Times. He was an American, and he took an interest in her, and it's about their relationship. It also is about how that relationship impacted the people in Edith's household. Teddy, her husband, who was clearly a manic depressive, and really, in a way, it may have been the final straw. It may have been the reason that she sold the Mount not long after. And Anna Ballman, who had loved her, supported her, and been with her for many years. It really, truly impacted her as well, at least in my version of the story. So, like I said, I'm going to read you scenes that all took place at the Mount. And the first scene, it's October of 1907, and it has snowed, a very early snow. And Morton Fullerton has come to visit Edith for the first time at the Mount. They've been friends in Paris, and he's been flirting with her. And now he's come to the Mount, and she's got somebody at the Mount staying with her because she had guests all the time. And Elliot Gregory was something of a columnist and a wag of the era. I imagine he was a mischief maker of sorts. And he has already warned her, I'd be careful of Fullerton because he has quite a reputation. So she's already been warned that he's quite a charming man. What's happened now, as I start the scene, is that Elliot has gone up to bed. She and Morton are alone, and he has been told that if you, in the certain times of year, you can smell the pines at night here, and he takes her out onto the terrace to smell the pines. Now there's snow on the terrace. They put on their galoshes and their coats or their wraps, and they come out here together. The scent of the pines reaches their noses the moment the French doors are opened. The shock of cold is vitalizing. With the heavy clouds mostly gone, the stars gleam like ice chips in the sky. Ghostly outlines trace the hedges in the gardens and the lindens in the lime walk below. Edith relishes the sound of her feet crunching on the 1.5 inches of snowfall. What a perfect night, he tells her. It makes me think of my childhood. The air here is an elixir. I can see why you chose this place. Yes, it's very special. He gestures to the garden. In this light, it looks black and white, like a steel engraving. How accurate and clever, she thinks, noting that the scene does indeed seem devoid of color. It's nighttime, by the way, I don't know if I said that. His voice grows intimate. I almost didn't come here, you know. Why? The train schedule was impossible. I had to change trains 3 times. It would have been easier to go directly to my parents. What changed your mind? You. He turns to her. I wanted more of your company. She feels an exquisite expansion of her lungs. It's not unlike the one and only time she was allowed to take a roller coaster ride as a child. Her mother had a headache, so her father took her for the afternoon to the Frascati Gardens in Paris. She can still recall the big sign with its gold and red letters, Le Chemin de Centrifuge. We'll keep this a secret from your mother, her father had said. Oh, how special Edith felt that day. They'd had to wait in line in the sun for ages. She remembers her trembling, childish anticipation as they were ushered into their little carriage and strapped in with leather straps. Her father put his arm around her, and the tiny train began a slow, frightening ascent up the steel mountain. Are you afraid? Her father whispered in her ear. No, Papa, because I'm with you. And then at the top of the hill, they were looking out over all eternity. When the coaster descended, she had the sensation that her stomach dropped away, allowing her lungs to expand to 10 times their size. And this is exactly how she feels right now. The rush of air into her lungs leaves her speechless for a moment. I'm so pleased you decided to come, she finally manages to tell Fullerton, though her voice meters out, breathy and soft. After being here, Edith, I shall never think of you the same. She shivers at the sound of her Christian name from his lips. No? Houses say so much about people, don't they? I've always thought so. Yes, I know you do. The way you describe houses speaks volumes about your characters. You even use house in your title, the House of Mirth. It's from Ecclesiastes, isn't it? So few people realize that. My father is a minister. The way you describe, my father is a minister. I grew up with a Bible always at hand. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. Did I get it right? Well done, she says. He steps back on the terrace so he can see the house more fully. If I were a reader and you were a character, I'd say this house belongs to an extraordinarily haunting woman at the peak of her life. Would you like me to tell you more? Yes, she says hesitantly. She has seen the world and delights in its bounty, but doesn't need to prove it to anyone. She brings together the classicism of New England with the sophistication of Europe. But there are secrets here, illusion, doors that look double on one side, but are in fact single on the other. I believe your life is rather like those doors. My life, she asks. She knows that she has grown crimson. Whatever do you mean? Edith, he says, then nothing more. She revels in the tingling feeling his words have generated. Does he know that she and Teddy are nothing to one another? That she is a free and single soul? The air is icy, the breeze picking up, but the warmth between them is palpable. And what does your home in Paris say about you, she asks. It says I rent a few rooms from a landlady because I'm a poor, lowly journalist. He gently takes her elbow and turns her back so her eyes meet his. It says, I would rather be at Edith Wharton's house. She hears her breath catch. Mr. Fullerton, she says too loudly, it's late. For a moment, he doesn't let go of her arm. They stand face to face in the snow, alone, the fog of their breath blending and swirling together in the cold. He finally releases her and, leaving her on the terrace, removes Teddy's galoshes at the French doors. Albert, hearing them return, takes the dripping overshoes with a look of distaste. Edith, after stamping her feet at the door, sits on the sofa to remove her boots. She feels self-conscious because she knows Fullerton is watching her. Yes, is there anything I can get you? She asks. She shudders at how dismissive she sounds. Her tone reminds her of how her mother used to speak to her father. No, thank you. I have everything. I'll be going up to bed. There is a touch of hurt in his voice. Good night, Mr. Fullerton. Sleep well. Call me Will. My family does. She smiles weakly. She can't quite imagine calling him Will. It is too simple, too American. Might I call you Morton? Henry sometimes does. Henry James. Call me any name but Mr. Fullerton, he says. Good night, Morton, she says, and listens to each and every one of his footsteps up the stairs. And then there's a space. And let me just say that Jules was an old dog who died that year, and Nisette and Me Too were little tiny dogs that were her little companions that you see in pictures of her sometimes. The next day, after an excited night tossing, often waking, Edith props herself up in bed and writes, but stops early, feeling the tug of wanting to see Fullerton again. Elliot and Fullerton are chatting by the drawing room fire when she comes downstairs. Would anyone like a tour of the gardens? She asks. Elliot shakes his head, announcing he's happy to stay inside with old Jules warming his feet. Jules barely lifts his head to acknowledge Edith's presence and sighs loudly as he settles his chin back down on Elliot's velvet slipper. But Fullerton stands, and with an impish smile raises his hand like a little boy at school. Wraps and boots are supplied, and the pups intuitively head for the French doors. As Edith and Fullerton work their way down the icy staircase from the terrace, he holds out his arm for her. She grabs onto the warm tweed of his coat, relishing the solidity of his muscles. Fullerton turns his head to her, his eyes gleaming. So this is how Admiral Peary felt as he ventured out into the frozen wild. Imagine Nisette and Me Too pulling our dog sled. The thin panes of ice at the edges of the steps shatter beneath their feet. The dogs run ahead onto the pristine garden paths, kicking up flurries of white, letting out shrill, fox-like yelps. Frosted like ice cream bombs, the lime trees, whose beauty arises from how they flutter, now stand encased in ice, paralyzed, like the trees and murals she's seen in old New England houses, epic, childlike. Beneath them, Fullerton gathers sticks brought down by the storm and tosses them towards the dogs for a game of fetch. As Edith watches his youthful antics, she feels as though Fullerton is the only object in her world that's moving at normal speed. All else feels slowed. The late morning sun breaks at an angle through the pines, spreading the hedges and frozen beds with buttery light. She can hear her own heartbeat in her ears. How measured it sounds. The snow silences all else. Has she ever felt so extraordinarily sated or content? The game moves farther and farther along the path toward the edge of the woodlands until Fullerton has gone so far he stands and waves and begins to run back to her. He exudes such joy as though he could not possibly wish to be anywhere else or with anyone else. Later, as they walk through the beds of frozen flowers, their footsteps match, and Edith can feel the heat and pressure of his arm through her wraps. It makes her too breathless, too giddy, so she stoops to tap snow off the once glorious chrysanthemums. I do hate seeing the season end like this, she says. What was just yesterday an efflorescence of russet and spice has grown limp and blistered, black and slimy. It's a shame you weren't here even one day sooner. The garden was still beautiful. I wouldn't have given up the snow for all the flowers you had, Fullerton says. We'll remember the snow. I might not have remembered the flowers. She's warmed by how he speaks of them as we. As they chat and stroll beyond the gardens and through the shady paths, Edith finds it difficult to concentrate on his words. She is so distracted by the insistence of his presence. She feels dented by him. He marks her soul more than anyone she's ever known. She thinks briefly of Elliot's warning. Fullerton is indeed a very charming man. Now, during the fall, the autumn and the winter in Paris, she and Fullerton are having now an affair, and it is just really distracting her, and you know, it's been a hard time for Anna. And now they've come back to the Mount, and Fullerton, who was completely involved in the affair, is now not writing her and breaking her heart, just not talking to her in any way. She you know, even ends up cabling him. And I mean, the letters that Edith wrote are so heartbreaking. If you ever, I used many of them in the book, but if you ever read them, it's really touching to think of a woman so accomplished and so extraordinary being so brought low by a man who won't answer her letters. So what happens is Anna is feeling Edith's wrath. Edith has been very hard on her, and now calls her in to have tea with her. Edith sends one of the maids to bring Anna to the drawing room for tea. Nervously, Anna seats herself in the needlepoint bergère across from Edith. She can't even bear to look up, so she stares at her hands, but her eyes are unseeing. Her heart is rattling in her chest like a motor car with a faulty engine. Would you like a cake? Edith asks. No, I ate too much at luncheon. In truth, she ate nothing. The cook is very good, isn't she? I think the food is the best we've had here since we've taken up at the Mount. Anna nods, still can't look up. If she sees Edith's face, will she see a gorgon before her? Will she turn to stone? Tani, I want to offer you something, Edith says. A present, really. I hope you'll hear me out and be open to it. Anna's nerves keep her from sitting still. Her legs jerk as though they wish to run. All winter while we were in Paris, you talked about how you wanted to get over to Germany, about your time there when you were young. Anna nods, but has a hard time remembering, ever telling Edith that she wished to go back to Germany. Maybe she mentioned it once when they were talking about German poetry, but surely she didn't speak of it all winter as Edith's implied. I want to give you a gift of a trip abroad. I don't understand. We're quite fixed for money these days. It's rather stunning how well the books have done, especially The House of Mirth. It's such a success in France. Yes. I want to send you to Europe for the rest of the summer. Germany, Italy, wherever you like. I owe it to you. Now Anna raises her head and gazes on the woman she has known best in all her life. She's expecting to see an ugliness in her familiar face, but Edith simply looks like Edith. She is pale, and her mouth is sweet and kind as it was when she was a child offering Anna a flower she picked from the field. You owe me nothing, Anna says. But I do. I owe you everything. In truth, I'm not much fun to be with right now. I'm not myself. I fear I've been unkind to you. I seem to irritate you, Anna ventures. It's not you. Everything irritates me right now. I'm suffering, and only you know why. But I don't know why. You haven't told me anything. You know the source of my suffering. I don't want to tell you what's happened. You'll only gloat. Gloat! Anna is shocked. I could never gloat at your pain. I talked to Teddy about it, and we both want to send you to Europe as a thank you. If you want, you can come back for the autumn for a bit, and until we leave for France in the winter, or you could stay the rest of the summer and autumn and meet us in Paris. That's another option. You don't owe me anything. I knew you'd be hard to persuade. I knew you'd fight me on this. But I want to do something nice for you, and I thought once you mulled it over, you'd be pleased. You needn't tell me now. Think it over. Talk to Gross. You could, of course, go back to Missouri. Anna's from Missouri. Her family's there anyway. That would be fine as well. I just want to give you something, a trip, a gift. Teddy does too. You were so kind to him when he was ill, far kinder than I was. He reminds me all the time. Anna says nothing. The offer lodges in her heart, radiating pain. And she's trying to sort out why. Because Edith can't bear the sight of her. How has it come to this? What have I done to make you want me to leave? Anna asks. There. She set it out for both of them to see. Oh no, you mustn't think of it that way. I'm happiest when I'm helping you. You know I am. But wouldn't you enjoy some time away, some time to see your childhood places? You have cousins in Germany. Imagine seeing Weimar again, Goethe's home, and Italy. You've always said you long to see Italy again. We pay for the nicest sort of travel. Anna can see how beseeching Edith's eyes are. Do you really want me to go? Anna asks. I know you haven't been happy with my typing. It's not that. Heavens, it's not that. That was me being absurd. You weren't happy when I was gone last summer. Perhaps this time you could help me find a replacement, a temporary replacement that I could trust. If you were doing the choosing, well, the woman we had last summer was a nightmare. You send me away from Paris for the whole spring, and then you send me away again. Perhaps you're through with me. I'd rather you just say so. You're not responsible for me. I could go back to teaching. I could find a place of my own in New York, like the apartment I had on 95th Street. I'm not afraid. Nonetheless, Anna can hear her voice quavering. No, Edith jumps up. I couldn't bear to lose you. You mustn't think that's what I want. I just need time. It's because I warned you about him. I wish I'd never told you what I knew. Oh, Tani, why must he come between us? It isn't right. It isn't fair. It isn't, but there it is. Anna feels utterly exhausted. She would not have changed anything. Warning Edith was something she had to do. Sometimes friendships go bad, she tells herself. Relationships soften and rot like old fruit. They have their time and then they shrivel and grow putrid. She feels her shoulders shaking. She doesn't want to cry in front of Edith. She can't. Edith comes to Anna and kneels down before her. "My beloved Tani," she says. Tears spill from Anna's eyes, making it hard to take in the woman who was once her dearest friend, her very heart. Edith reaches up and wipes a tear from Anna's cheek. "You are like a mother to me, but sometimes when we are at our most foolish, we don't want our mothers to see. Don't you understand?" Anna shakes her head. "I don't judge you," she says. "I worry for you, but I don't judge you." "I judge myself," Edith says. "I feel like a fool, and when I see you looking at me the way you do, I... Take this trip. Do it for me. You'll enjoy it. You'll see. Perhaps one of your cousins can travel with you. Take this trip and make it the gift I intended to be. Get away from me before I hurt you." Edith reaches out and puts her arms around Anna's waist and settles her head in her lap just as she used to when she was a child, and Anna was her savior. "Please," she begs, "do it for me." I'm happy to answer any questions if people have questions. Okay, there's a question.
Okay, you already know what I'm going to ask, but I'm just going to beg you, please won't you read about Henry James?
Oh,
yes.
I don't know that I can even find that part. Okay, well, I will look for that part.
This is an audience who knows Henry James and likes Henry James.
Okay. You know, I didn't mark that part, so I'm not prepared. Trying to think where it is. Okay, it's early in Paris.
Is it in Paris that he gets sick?
Yes, it is. Here it is. Okay. I'm almost there.
I should have warned you. I'm sorry.
Yes, it's okay. It's somewhere. Oh, okay. So Henry James has come to visit them in Paris. This is really before she falls in love with Fullerton, and they are great friends, as everybody knows. And then Henry manages to become ill, and this is true. He did become ill at their house before they went on a motor trip. They were going to go on a big motor trip through France. Edith is amazed that she has so far avoided Teddy's influenza. Instead, it's Henry who falls ill. 2 days after his arrival, he asks Alfred White, Teddy's valet, to inform Edith that he is seriously, possibly fatally, indisposed. "I'm sorry, ma'am, that's what he told me to convey," Alfred says, looking at his shoes. Edith hurries to Henry's room and taps on the door. "May I come in?" she asks. "If you dare," he says. Henry looks like a great beached whale lying in the middle of the lee bateau with the covers neatly tucked up under his armpits. "I think I shall die," he says. "You'll have to have a piano mover remove me from this lovely bedroom," he announces. He moans and lies back on his pillow. Edith notes that he has put on a beautiful silk dressing gown and wears an ascot. Quite an effort just for lying in bed. "We'll take very good care of you," she assures him. She arranges for much tea with honey, all sorts of croissants and toast and stewed chicken to be brought to his room. Later in the afternoon, Henry asks for Anna. Soft, serious Anna enters his room, shuts the door, and doesn't come out for an hour. Edith, feeling a tad jealous, monitors the door. When Anna emerges, Edith ushers her away from Henry's room. "What on earth did he speak to you about?" she asks. "He told me what he wanted us to do if he died." Edith can't help but laugh. "He's not going to die. He simply has a head cold." "I took notes," Anna says, and with only the faintest smile holds up a pad of paper filled from top to bottom. "We'll have to have these framed for future reference," Edith says. Good heavens, he only wants black horses in his funeral procession, no cars? Very old-fashioned of him. A week later, when Henry is himself again, guests begin to arrive once more, including Henry's particular request, the journalist, Mr. Morton Fullerton.